In the heart of Norse mythology lies a tale of unparalleled beauty and deep sorrow, a story that resonates with the purity of a cherished soul. Balder, the shining light of the gods, was the beloved son of Odin and Frigg, and his story stirs the deepest corners of our hearts. Balder's origins are nothing short of celestial. Born of Odin, the All-Father, and Frigg, the queen of the Aesir, he was the embodiment of light and goodness. From the moment of his birth, it was clear that Balder was a figure of exceptional grace. His radiance was not just physical, but seemed to touch the very essence of life and joy. His presence brought a sense of calm and happiness to the often tumultuous lives of the gods. To the gods of Asgard, Balder was more than just a divine being, he was the epitome of beauty and virtue. His laughter was a balm to the weary, and his kindness was a beacon in the darkest of times. Balder's role among the gods was not just as a symbol of light, but as a source of comfort and hope. He was the one who reminded them of the beauty and purity that existed in their world. His attributes were as captivating as his spirit. Balder's skin gleamed with an almost unearthly glow, reflecting the light of the heavens. His hair, as golden as the sun, framed a face that was the very picture of serenity. His eyes, deep pools of calm, seemed to hold the warmth of summer and the gentle promise of dawn. These physical traits were not mere adornments, but a reflection of his inner qualities, his wisdom, compassion, and the warmth he offered to all around him. Symbolically, Balder represented hope and renewal. He was often seen as a counterbalance to the harsh realities of life and the encroaching darkness of fate. In a world filled with battles and struggles, he was a symbol of the light that could pierce through the shadows. His very existence was a reminder of the beauty and purity that could still be found, even in a world that often seemed unforgiving. The influence Balder had on the people of his time was profound. To them, he was not just a god to be revered, but a guiding light in their daily lives. His story was told with reverence and affection, and his qualities were celebrated in songs and tales. The love and respect for Balder went beyond mere worship. He was a figure who inspired people to be better, to seek out the light even in their own lives. Balder's importance among the gods was matched only by the deep sorrow his fate would later bring. He was the god whose very presence seemed to defy the darkness that loomed over the cosmos. His life was a testament to the enduring power of goodness and beauty. It was his light that illuminated the darkest corners of the world, and it was this same light that made his eventual loss so devastating. In every smile, every act of kindness, and every ray of sunshine, there was a piece of Balder's essence. His life was a gift to those around him, a constant reminder of the beauty that existed in the world. And so, as we remember Balder, we hold close the warmth he brought into our lives, cherishing the light that he was and the light that he still represents in the myths and stories of old. In the quiet of the night, where shadows dance and silence reigns, Balder's dreams turned into a chilling premonition of doom. These were not ordinary dreams, but dark visions that seemed to claw at the edges of reality. Each night, as Balder closed his eyes, he was plunged into a world of fear and dread, where the light he so embodied flickered uncertainly. In these nightmares, Balder found himself standing amidst a landscape of desolation. The once vibrant and comforting world around him had turned bleak, filled with an oppressive darkness that swallowed the light. Shadows moved with a life of their own, whispering cruel promises of his demise. The ground beneath him felt cold and lifeless, an unsettling contrast to the warmth and radiance he was known for. The scenes were vivid and haunting, leaving Balder in a cold sweat, his heart pounding with a foreboding sense of inevitability. The most disturbing aspect of these dreams was their clarity. Balder saw faces, familiar faces, twisted in expressions of sorrow and grief, as though they were witnessing his end. The visions were so real, so intense, that Balder awoke each morning with a gnawing fear, his once reassuring light dimmed by the shadows of what he had seen. He tried to shake off the dreams, but they clung to him, seeding a deep unease that grew with each passing night. When Balder shared these terrifying dreams with the other gods, a shiver ran through Asgard. The gods, who had always seen Balder as a beacon of hope and joy, were deeply unsettled. Odin, the wise and all-seeing, knew that such dreams were not mere figments of imagination, but omens of a grave fate. The thought of losing Balder, whose very existence seemed to repel the darkness, filled him with dread. Odin's normally composed demeanor cracked under the weight of this foreboding prophecy. He knew that if Balder's dreams were true, it meant a shadow was creeping into their lives that even their might could not fend off. Frigg, Balder's mother, was engulfed by a profound and almost unbearable anguish. Her love for Balder was boundless, and the thought of losing him was too much to bear. She saw her son not just as a god but as a part of herself, and the nightmares that plagued him were a piercing wound to her heart. She feared that these dreams were a reflection of a reality that was slipping away, and her heart ached with the knowledge that no amount of maternal protection could shield Balder from the dark fate that seemed to loom ever closer. The gods convened in urgent council, their usual light-hearted banter replaced by grim discussion. They understood that these were not ordinary dreams, but signs of something much more sinister. The once vibrant and joyous atmosphere of their divine gatherings turned somber as they grappled with the terrifying possibility that Balder's death was not just a bad dream but a foretold event. In their desperation, the gods sought to prevent this looming tragedy. Odin, always the seeker of wisdom, embarked on a perilous journey to the land of the dead, hoping to uncover any hidden truths or possible ways to alter the dreadful prophecy. Frigg, heartbroken and determined, took measures to ensure that no harm would come to her beloved son. Her efforts to protect Balder seemed all-consuming, driven by an unspoken hope that she could somehow change the course of fate. The weight of Balder's nightmares cast a long shadow over the gods, clouding their days with fear and their nights with restless worry. They knew that the light Balder brought into their world was precious and that losing him would leave a void that could never be filled. In their concern, they were united not just by their roles as gods, but by their shared love and reverence for Balder. The darkness that loomed in Balder's dreams was a stark reminder that even in their divine existence, they were not immune to the forces of fate and sorrow. Balder's dreams were a chilling prelude to a fate that seemed as inevitable as it was heartbreaking. Each night's terror was a reminder of the preciousness of the light he brought and the darkness that sought to extinguish it. The gods' concern and Frigg's anguish underscored the profound impact that Balder had on their lives, highlighting the depth of their love and the harsh reality of the destiny that awaited them all. In the cold embrace of the underworld, where shadows seemed to whisper secrets of despair, Odin made his descent. His heart was heavy with the weight of fear and determination as he ventured into the realm of Hell, seeking answers about the ominous fate awaiting his beloved son, Balder. Odin's path was fraught with challenges. The descent into Hell was not a mere physical journey but a trial of spirit and will. The very air grew colder as he ventured deeper, and the dim light from above seemed to fade into a distant memory. The chilling silence was occasionally broken by mournful wails that echoed through the darkness, a stark reminder of the sorrow and loss that pervaded this shadowed world. As Odin pressed forward, his mind was consumed by one single thought: the fate of Balder. Every step he took seemed to weigh heavier with the burden of the unknown. The darkness around him felt almost alive, a swirling mass of grief and foreboding. The ground beneath his feet was cold and unyielding, and each sound was amplified in the oppressive quiet. Finally, Odin reached the throne of Hel, the queen of the underworld. Hel, a figure of both beauty and melancholy, sat upon her dark throne with an expression that was as unreadable as the abyss itself. Odin, despite his divine status and the knowledge he possessed, approached her with a mix of reverence and trepidation. He understood that Hel held the key to understanding the dark prophecy that haunted his son's dreams. Odin's voice, usually so commanding and powerful, now trembled slightly as he spoke. He pleaded with Hel, asking for insight into the fate that awaited Balder. Hel listened, her gaze piercing through the darkness as if weighing the very essence of Odin's request. She was a being of great power, but also one marked by an eerie, sorrowful grace. With a heavy heart, Hel revealed the prophecy that lay before them. The prophecy was stark and unrelenting, a cold and hard truth that struck Odin with the force of a hammer. It spoke of a time when the light of Balder, so bright and cherished, would be extinguished by the hand of fate. The prophecy detailed how the gods' own actions, though well-intentioned, would unwittingly lead to Balder's death. Odin listened with a growing sense of dread as Hel's words painted a picture of an inevitable end. The prophecy spoke of a world where the forces of darkness, long held at bay by the gods, would rise with a vengeance. Baldur's death was not just a personal loss but a harbinger of greater chaos to come. It was a reminder of the fragility of their existence and the looming shadow of Ragnarok, the end of all things. The weight of the prophecy was almost too much for Odin to bear. Each word seemed to resonate with a painful clarity, underscoring the futility of trying to change what was destined. The knowledge that Baldur's death was a foregone conclusion brought a crushing sorrow to Odin's heart. He saw not only the loss of his son, but also the beginning of a chain of events that would lead to the downfall of the gods themselves. Odin's return from Hel was marked by a profound sense of despair. The answers he sought had been revealed, but they came at the cost of hope. The journey back to Asgard was solemn, each step feeling heavier than the last. The shadows of the underworld seemed to cling to him, a constant reminder of the darkness that awaited. As Odin emerged from the depths, the light of the world above seemed dimmer, tainted by the knowledge he now carried. The prophecy had confirmed his worst fears, and the weight of his knowledge was a burden he would carry for the rest of his days. The gods' once bright future was now shadowed by the certainty of Baldur's death and the impending chaos that it foretold. As the chilling winds of foreboding swept through Asgard, Frigg's heart was gripped by an unshakable dread for her beloved son, Baldur. With each passing day, the weight of the prophecy grew heavier, filling her with a desperate resolve. Frigg, the queen of the gods and Baldur's devoted mother, knew she had to act swiftly to shield her son from the dark fate that loomed so dangerously close. Frigg's love for Baldur was boundless, a fierce and unyielding flame that drove her to take drastic measures. Her maternal instinct compelled her to seek out every possible means of protection for her son. She began with a relentless mission to ensure that no harm would come to Baldur. Frigg approached every corner of the world, her plea echoing through every forest, mountain, and river. In her quest for safety, Frigg made an urgent and heartfelt appeal to every living and non-living thing. She asked each element, each creature, to vow never to bring harm to her precious child. From the towering oaks and whispering winds to the smallest insects and the very stones beneath her feet, Frigg sought assurances of protection. She spoke with a voice laden with the weight of her fear and the love she held for Baldur, imploring each entity to grant her son immunity from harm. Everywhere she went, her pleas were met with promises of safety. The trees promised not to let their branches fall upon him, the rivers swore not to flood and drown, and the animals vowed not to attack. Each promise was a thread in the tapestry of protection Frigg was weaving around Baldur. The world itself seemed to respond to her desperation, and for a time, hope flickered in her heart. Frigg's efforts were tireless, and her determination was nothing short of monumental. She believed that her exhaustive efforts had succeeded, that every possible danger had been addressed. Yet, amidst the myriad assurances she had gathered, there was one small, overlooked detail, a single plant, so unassuming and delicate that it had slipped through her grasp. This plant was mistletoe. In its simplicity and slightness, it was easily forgotten amidst the grandeur and power of the other promises Frigg had secured. It was a humble plant, its tiny berries and slender branches seemingly inconsequential compared to the towering trees and roaring rivers. In the grand scheme of protection, mistletoe seemed too small to be a threat, and so it was left unmentioned, its potential for harm unseen. Unbeknownst to Frigg, this small oversight would prove to be a tragic flaw in her otherwise perfect shield of safety. The mistletoe, innocent and overlooked, held within it a dark potential that would later become the instrument of the very fate Frigg had sought so desperately to avoid. As Frigg returned to Asgard, her heart was lighter, believing that she had safeguarded her son against all dangers. She saw Baldur's radiant smile and felt a fleeting sense of relief, unaware that her final, heartbreaking misstep had left a chink in the armor of protection she had so painstakingly built. The mistletoe, in its quiet and unassuming way, waited. It lay in the shadows of the world, a silent reminder of the imperfection in even the most well-intentioned efforts. Frigg's love had been all-encompassing, but in its boundless reach, it had missed one small yet crucial detail. The very thing that she had overlooked was the one that would bring about the unfolding tragedy, leaving her with the haunting realization that even the greatest love cannot always shield against the inexorable forces of fate. In the heart of Asgard, where laughter once filled the air, a chilling game took shape, destined to become a symbol of both divine arrogance and impending doom. The gods, basking in the warm glow of their own invincibility, had decided to turn Baldur's supposed safety into a source of amusement. The idea was simple: they would throw objects at Baldur, each hoping to test their divine strength against him. To their delight and, perhaps, their misjudgment, every item, from heavy stones to sharp swords, simply bounced harmlessly off his radiant form. It was a spectacle of joy and confidence, a game that celebrated their belief in his complete and utter invulnerability. Baldur stood in the center of this chaotic display, a picture of serene grace amid the flurry of objects. His laughter rang out, a sound as pure as sunlight, each chuckle a testament to the safety he felt in the gods' embrace. The gods watched with gleeful eyes, their smiles broad and their hearts light. They felt untouchable, their confidence reinforced by the invincibility of their beloved Baldur. It was a display of divine pride, an extravagant show of their power and the belief that nothing could harm their cherished light. But among the crowd of gods, there was one who watched with a different kind of delight, a figure whose presence often brought a touch of mischief and malice. Loki, the trickster god, observed the game with a calculating glint in his eyes. He saw not only the joy and camaraderie but also an opportunity. Loki's heart, blackened by envy and dark intentions, harbored a secret knowledge that would turn this light-hearted game into a scene of unimaginable sorrow. Loki had learned of Frigg's exhaustive efforts to protect Baldur, and in his cunning mind, he discovered a crucial detail that everyone else had overlooked. The mistletoe, that tiny, seemingly insignificant plant, had been left unprotected. Frigg had extracted promises from every living and non-living thing, but the mistletoe, with its fragile appearance and innocuous presence, had slipped through the cracks. With this knowledge, Loki devised a plan that was as cruel as it was clever. He sought out the mistletoe, its small berries glistening with a deadly promise. Loki fashioned a dart from the mistletoe, its innocent exterior hiding the terrible potential within. He approached Hodr, the blind god, whose heart was pure but whose sight was shadowed by darkness. Loki saw in Hodr a pawn to execute his nefarious scheme. Loki's deception was a masterpiece of malevolence. He approached Hodr under the guise of camaraderie, feigning concern for his exclusion from the game. With a pretense of friendly encouragement, Loki offered Hodr the mistletoe dart. He spoke with a voice smooth and persuasive, leading Hodr to believe that the dart would be a way for him to participate in the game, to join in the fun that the other gods were enjoying. Hodr, eager to be part of the joy, took the dart from Loki. He trusted the trickster, unaware of the malice behind the seemingly innocent gesture. Loki guided his hand, positioning him to throw the dart at Baldur. The gods, caught up in their celebration, paid no attention to the subtle machinations unfolding around them. They were too absorbed in their own merriment to sense the dark turn that was about to unfold. As Hodr let the dart fly, the mistletoe pierced the air with a silent, deadly intent. It struck Baldur, and in that moment, the gods' laughter turned to gasps of horror. The dart, small and unassuming, had found its mark with tragic precision. Baldur, who had been the embodiment of light and joy, fell to the ground, his once bright eyes dimming. The scene that followed was one of utter devastation. The gods, who had so recently reveled in their own invincibility, were now faced with the heart-wrenching reality of their hubris. Baldur's death was not just a personal loss, but a catastrophic blow to the very essence of their world. The radiant light that had once been a source of comfort and joy was extinguished, leaving a profound darkness in its wake. Loki, with a heart as cold as the shadows he manipulated, watched the chaos unfold with a grim satisfaction. His plan, born of malice and envy, had succeeded beyond his darkest dreams. The gods' laughter had been replaced by cries of anguish, their joy shattered by the cruel twist of fate that Loki had orchestrated with such cruel precision. The fatal game, once a symbol of divine pride and arrogance, had become a dark reminder of the fragility of their existence. In the aftermath, the gods were left to grapple with their loss and the harsh reality that their greatest light had been snuffed out by the very forces they had once believed themselves immune to. The air in Asgard, once vibrant with laughter and warmth, had suddenly turned cold and heavy with dread. In the midst of the gods' joyous game, where each object bounced harmlessly off Baldur's radiant form, a sinister twist was about to unfold. Loki, ever the harbinger of misfortune, had a dark plan that would turn this game into a scene of unimaginable sorrow. Loki's scheme involved Hodr, the blind god, who had been left out of the revelry. Hodr, though blind, was kind-hearted and eager to join in the fun. Loki, with a heart full of malice and deceit, saw in Hodr an easy target for his cruel plan. Under the guise of friendship, Loki approached Hodr with a seemingly innocent gift, a dart made of mistletoe. Hodr, unable to see the dart, trusted Loki completely. The trickster god spun a tale of how the dart would let him participate in the game and share in the joy that the other gods were experiencing. He spoke with a false warmth that masked his true intentions, convincing Hodr that this was a way to be part of the celebration. With a mix of excitement and trust, Hodr took the dart from Loki's hand. The blind god was eager to prove himself and be included in the merriment. Loki guided him to where Baldur stood, still the center of attention and laughter. The gods were oblivious to the dangerous game that was about to take a tragic turn. They cheered and laughed, their voices ringing out in carefree joy. Hodr, with the mistletoe dart in hand, was positioned to throw. Loki whispered words of encouragement, nudging him towards his target. The dart, though small and seemingly insignificant, was now an instrument of fate. Hodr, guided by Loki's deceit, threw the dart with a hopeful heart. The moment the dart left Hodr's hand, time seemed to slow. It flew through the air with an almost eerie grace, its tiny berries glinting with a deadly promise. The trajectory was true, and the dart struck Baldur with a soft, sickening thud. The impact was slight, but the result was devastating. The scene that followed was a nightmare made real. Baldur, who had been so full of life and light, suddenly crumpled to the ground. The laughter of the gods turned into horrified gasps as the radiant figure of Baldur lay still and lifeless. The air seemed to freeze, and the vibrant energy of the gods was replaced by a profound and heart-wrenching silence. Frigg, who had watched over her son with a fierce protectiveness, was the first to react. Her scream of anguish shattered the stillness, a raw and primal cry that echoed through the halls of Asgard. Her heart, already shattered by the foreboding prophecy, now broke completely as she knelt beside Baldur's lifeless body. Tears streamed down her face, each drop a testament to the depth of her sorrow and the utter devastation of her loss. The other gods stood in shock, their faces a mixture of disbelief and grief. The joyous game they had so casually enjoyed was now a memory tinged with horror. They looked at each other, their eyes wide with the realization of what had just occurred. The light that had once been Baldur, a beacon of hope and joy, was now extinguished, leaving a void that seemed impossible to fill. Loki, watching from the sidelines with a smirk of satisfaction, reveled in the chaos he had orchestrated. His heart, darkened by envy and malice, felt a cold satisfaction as he observed the gods' torment. The trickster had succeeded in his cruel plan, and the repercussions of his actions were already beginning to unfold. The death of Baldur was not just a personal tragedy but a harbinger of a greater darkness. The gods' grief was palpable, their once bright world now cloaked in an overwhelming sorrow. Baldur's lifeless form was a stark reminder of the fragility of their existence and the harsh reality of the fate that had been foretold. In the aftermath, the gods were left to grapple with their loss and the painful truth that their invincibility was nothing more than a fragile illusion. The light of Baldur, once a symbol of joy and hope, was gone, leaving behind a deep and unending darkness. The game that had begun with laughter and joy had ended in a scene of tragic despair, marking the beginning of a sorrowful chapter in the story of the gods. The sun seemed to have lost its warmth, casting a pallid light over Asgard as the gods were engulfed by a grief so profound it felt almost tangible. The joyous echoes that had once filled the halls of their divine home were now replaced by a heavy silence. Baldur, the god who had been the embodiment of light and joy, was gone, and with his death, a deep, unending sorrow had taken hold of the entire realm. Frigg, overwhelmed by despair, moved through the once bright halls with a numbed grace. Her eyes, usually so full of light and warmth, were now clouded with a profound sadness that seemed to seep into her very soul. She had lost not just a son, but a piece of herself, and the weight of her grief was almost unbearable. Her cries, filled with a raw, heart-wrenching pain, echoed through the halls, mingling with the sobs and wails of the other gods. The gods gathered in mourning, their faces etched with sorrow. They stood in silent vigil, each lost in their own reflections of the tragedy that had befallen them. The bright and lively Asgard had become a place of mourning, each corner marked by the absence of the light that had once been Balder. The gods were draped in dark robes, their usual majestic attire replaced by simple garments that spoke of their deep mourning. As the days passed, the preparations for Balder's funeral began. It was a task marked by both reverence and sorrow, a final act of love and respect for the god who had been taken too soon. The funeral preparations were a solemn ritual, undertaken with the utmost care and attention to detail, reflecting the profound respect and love the gods had for Balder. A grand pyre was built, a towering structure made of the finest wood, adorned with intricate carvings and symbols that honored Balder's life and legacy. It was a stark contrast to the vibrant beauty that Balder had embodied, now a somber reminder of his absence. The pyre was decorated with flowers and herbs, each chosen for their symbolic meanings, adding a touch of beauty to the otherwise sorrowful scene. Balder's body was placed upon the pyre, wrapped in fine linen and adorned with his most treasured belongings. The sight of his lifeless form, so peaceful yet so haunting, was a poignant reminder of the light that had been extinguished. The gods gathered around the pyre, their faces somber as they paid their final respects. Each of them took a moment to offer a personal tribute, sharing memories and expressing their sorrow at the loss of a god who had been loved by all. In addition to the grand pyre, a ship was prepared for Balder's final journey. The ship, a symbol of transition and passage, was adorned with precious items and offerings meant to honor the deceased and provide for his journey to the afterlife. The ship was both a vessel of sorrow and a beacon of hope, a way to guide Balder on his final voyage. The rituals performed were deeply symbolic. The gods made offerings of food, drink, and treasures, each item representing their love and respect for Balder. The offerings were meant to provide for him in the afterlife, ensuring that he would be well cared for on his journey beyond the world of the living. As the pyre was lit, the flames rose high, casting a flickering light over the somber assembly. The fire consumed the pyre and Balder's body, sending his essence into the air and the sky. The smoke from the fire curled upward, carrying with it the gods' prayers and hopes for Balder's safe passage. The sight of Balder's pyre burning, the flames dancing against the darkened sky, was both beautiful and tragic. The gods watched in silence, their hearts heavy with grief as they saw the last traces of their beloved god being consumed by the fire. The heat of the flames, once a symbol of life and warmth, now seemed to echo the burning sorrow that filled their hearts. As the pyre burned down, the gods remained gathered, their mourning a testament to the impact Balder had on their lives. His absence left a void that could never be filled, and the rituals performed were a reflection of their profound sorrow and their enduring love for the god who had brought light into their world. The funeral was not just a final farewell, but a powerful expression of the depth of their grief and their enduring respect for the light that had been lost. In the wake of Balder's tragic death, Asgard was enveloped in a profound sorrow, a darkness that seemed to stretch endlessly. Yet amid the grief and despair, a flicker of hope remained. Hermod, the swift and loyal messenger of the gods, stepped forward with a desperate mission. Determined to restore the light that had been so cruelly extinguished, he set out on a perilous journey to Hel, the underworld where Balder's spirit now resided. Hermod's journey was not just a physical one, but a voyage into the heart of darkness itself. Riding the swift horse Sleipnir, he traveled through the cold and shadowy realms that separated the living from the dead. The road was treacherous, filled with obstacles and challenges that seemed to echo the weight of his mission. Yet Hermod pressed on, driven by a fierce determination to bring back the god who had been loved by all. As he approached the gates of Hel, the chill in the air seemed to deepen, a reflection of the icy realm within. Hel, the ruler of the underworld, was a formidable figure whose domain was shrouded in gloom. The gates creaked open, revealing a landscape of desolation and darkness. The very atmosphere was thick with the melancholy of the souls who dwelled there, each shadow and whisper a reminder of the finality of death. Hermod was greeted by Hel herself, a figure of both beauty and menace, her presence commanding and cold. With a tone that carried the weight of the underworld, Hel listened as Hermod pleaded for Baldur's release. The gods of Asgard had sent their messenger with an offer of great significance, a promise that if all things in the world wept for Baldur, he would be allowed to return to the realm of the living. The condition was both simple and profound. Hel, though stern, was not without mercy. She agreed to release Baldur if she could witness the grief of all creation. It was a test of the gods and the world's true sorrow. If every being, from the mightiest god to the smallest creature, mourned Baldur's death, Hel would be moved to grant his return. Hermod, filled with both hope and trepidation, set out to ensure that the world would fulfill this promise. His journey was a desperate race against time, a quest to gather the tears of all who had known and loved Baldur. His hope rested on the idea that the depth of grief could persuade Hel to change her mind. However, as Hermod ventured back to the world of the living, a dark shadow loomed over his mission. The promise made to Hel was a poignant one, but it relied on the sincerity of all beings' grief. Unfortunately, not everyone's heart was touched by the same depth of sorrow. Despite the gods' best efforts to encourage mourning and the widespread grief felt by many, there was one being whose heart remained unmoved. Loki, whose malevolent actions had set this tragic course in motion, was not among those who wept for Baldur. His heart was as cold as the underworld itself, and he refused to mourn the god whose death had been the result of his own deceit. His lack of sorrow became the crucial flaw in the plan. For Hel's condition to be met, every single entity, including Loki, needed to show grief. As the time for the final judgment drew near, it became clear that the gods' hopes were dashed. Hermod's return to Hel was marked by a heart-wrenching realization. The promise had not been fulfilled in its entirety. Hel, with a somber but unyielding demeanor, declared that because not every being wept for Baldur, the god would remain in the underworld. The weight of the god's failure was heavy, a cruel reminder of the fragility of hope against the harsh realities of fate. The failure of Hermod's mission was a bitter blow to Asgard. The light that had once been Baldur was now a distant memory, and the gods' grief was compounded by the realization that their best efforts had not been enough. Hermod returned, his spirit crushed by the weight of his unfulfilled quest, and the sorrow in Asgard deepened. Baldur's fate was sealed, a tragic reminder of the limits of their power and the cruel twists of fate that even the gods could not escape. The promise that had once held a glimmer of hope now lay in ruins, and the gods were left to mourn the loss of their beloved light, knowing that their last hope had been thwarted by a heart that refused to grieve. Baldur's death was not just a tragic loss for the gods, it was the herald of a much darker fate that loomed over their world. The once vibrant halls of Asgard, now shrouded in sorrow, seemed to resonate with a chilling foreboding. The gods, who had enjoyed a period of relative peace and prosperity, now faced the unsettling reality that Baldur's death marked the beginning of the end for their divine existence. The air in Asgard grew heavy with the realization that the events set in motion by Baldur's death were leading towards a catastrophic prophecy known as Ragnarok. This prophecy foretold the end of the world, a series of apocalyptic events that would see the gods face their greatest trials and ultimately lead to the destruction of their world. Baldur's death was seen as the first sign of this impending doom, a cruel twist of fate that shattered the illusion of their invincibility and highlighted the inevitability of their downfall. The gods, once confident in their strength and unity, now found themselves haunted by the prophecy. They could no longer ignore the signs that pointed towards a future of chaos and destruction. The sense of dread that permeated Asgard was palpable, a constant reminder of the fragility of their existence. The death of Baldur had exposed the vulnerability of even the most powerful beings and cast a shadow over their future. In the midst of this growing despair, the gods turned their wrath towards Loki, the trickster who had orchestrated Baldur's death with such malevolence. Loki's actions had not only led to the tragic loss of a beloved god, but had also set in motion the events that would lead to Ragnarok. The gods' fury was fierce, and they were determined to exact retribution for the suffering and turmoil that Loki had caused. Loki's punishment was as harsh as it was symbolic. The gods, guided by a desire for justice and a need to contain the chaos that Loki had unleashed, decided to capture him and impose a fitting punishment. Loki was bound by chains, each link forged with the purpose of ensuring his eternal torment. His punishment was a reflection of the suffering he had inflicted upon the gods and the world. His chains were not ordinary, they were made from the entrails of his own son, a grotesque and fitting symbol of his betrayal and malice. Loki was bound in a cave, his chains anchored to a rock that held him in place. To further torment him, a serpent was positioned above him, its venom dripping slowly onto his face. Each drop of venom was a torment that mirrored the pain and grief that Loki's actions had caused. The sight of Loki's punishment was both horrific and poignant. The trickster god, once a figure of laughter and chaos, was now reduced to a pitiful, tormented figure. His cries and struggles were a stark contrast to the mischief he had once spread. The god's retribution was a clear message that even the gods had limits to their patience and that treachery would not go unpunished. As Loki endured his punishment, the gods looked on with a mix of satisfaction and sorrow. They had sought justice, but it came at a cost. The weight of their actions and the reality of their impending doom were ever present. The punishment of Loki was a reminder of the consequences of his actions and a reflection of the deeper tragedy that had befallen their world. Baldur's death had cast a long shadow over the gods, marking the beginning of a series of events that would lead to their ultimate fate. The prophecy of Ragnarok, once a distant and abstract idea, was now a looming certainty that shaped the gods' every decision. Their future was uncertain, and the sorrow of losing Baldur was compounded by the knowledge that their world was heading towards an end foretold by prophecy. The pain of Baldur's death, combined with the harsh punishment of Loki, underscored the profound impact that a single event could have on the lives of the gods. The once bright and hopeful world of Asgard was now a place overshadowed by grief, betrayal, and the ever-present threat of destruction. Baldur's death left a mark on Norse mythology that resonates through the ages, a story that has not only endured but also shaped the cultural landscape of the Norse world. His death was more than a tragic event, it became a symbol of profound truths about fate, innocence, and the relentless nature of death. Baldur, known for his light and warmth, was beloved by all who knew him. His story, filled with light and joy, was tragically cut short, but his legacy endured far beyond his death. In Norse mythology, Baldur's tale is remembered with a mixture of sorrow and reverence. His death is not merely a historical event, but a deeply emotional narrative that reflects the human experience of loss and the inevitable approach of fate. The myth of Baldur has been preserved through sagas and poems, where his name is invoked as a symbol of pure and innocent life cut short. His story is a poignant reminder of how even the most cherished beings are not immune to the harsh realities of fate. The gods' profound grief over his death echoes through these ancient texts, highlighting the depth of their loss and the impact it had on their world. Baldur's story has become a touchstone for exploring themes of innocence and the capricious nature of destiny. Baldur's death also serves as a powerful symbol of the inescapable nature of death. Despite the gods' efforts to shield him from harm, his demise was inevitable. This inevitability is a central theme in the mythology, reflecting the Norse understanding that death is an inescapable part of existence, even for the divine. Baldur's death is a reminder that no matter how loved or protected one might be, the threads of fate weave a path that cannot be avoided. His story speaks to the fragility of life and the sorrow that accompanies the loss of something beautiful and cherished. Baldur's death underscores the innocence that was lost, and his legacy is marked by the pain of that loss. It represents the fleeting nature of happiness and the inevitability of sorrow that touches everyone, regardless of their status or power. The symbolic meanings of Baldur's story extend beyond the immediate sorrow of his death. His tale is intertwined with the themes of prophecy and the inevitable approach of Ragnarok. Baldur's death is not just a standalone tragedy but a part of a larger narrative about the end times, highlighting how individual fates are interwoven with the grand tapestry of the cosmos. His death is seen as the first sign of the coming apocalypse, a harbinger of the chaos and destruction that will follow. Baldur's legacy is also reflected in the way his story has been remembered and retold. The emotional weight of his death continues to resonate, serving as a reminder of the enduring power of myths to convey deep truths about the human condition. The sadness that surrounds his story and the lessons it imparts about fate, innocence, and the nature of existence continue to influence and inspire. The memory of Balder has found a place in the hearts of those who hear his tale. His story evokes a deep emotional response, capturing the essence of human experience, joy and sorrow, love and loss. It serves as a timeless reminder of the fragility of life and the certainty of death, themes that are as relevant today as they were in ancient times. Balder's story is a testament to the enduring power of mythology to convey profound truths and evoke powerful emotions. His legacy lives on as a symbol of the beauty and brevity of life, a reminder of the innocence lost and the inevitability of fate. Through his tale, we continue to reflect on the nature of existence and the impact of loss, finding meaning and solace in the enduring legacy of a god who was loved and mourned.